Hi, I'm Amy Medford. Welcome to For Art's Sake. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to artist George Segal, who is about to receive his 5th honorary PhD, this time from the Massachusetts College of Art. He is currently preparing for a photography exhibit to be held at the National Center of Photography in Paris, whose director Robert Delpierre organized the Cartier-Bresson show at the ICP in New York City and is the original publisher of Robert Frank's The Americans. Recently returning from an exhibit of his sculpture in Tokyo, Mr. Segal has just held an exhibition of his most recent paintings at the Sidney Janis Gallery, where he has been showing for the past 30 years. George, you are best known as a sculptor, but you are much more than that. You also draw, photograph, and paint. Recently, you have moved the focus of your creative expression, your work, back to painting. Why?
Well, for me, that's complicated. I started out as a painter 30 or 35 years ago. When I was a student at NYU, I transferred to NYU from Pratt because abstract expressionist painters and sculptors were teaching at NYU in the art department, which was still preparing people for art degrees. No fine artist could depend on selling artwork as a way to support himself or herself. I fell in love with abstract expressionist painting. The look of it, its spirituality, anti-materialist stance. Those painters spoke like tough New York cabbies, and they were arguing nuance of philosophy and art philosophy with the best art historians around. Once I got into school, I was asked to join this fervent avant-garde group, which I loved. And then I found I couldn't obey their rules. As much as I loved the structure, the composition, the extraordinary, the vaulting high ambition of these people, they wanted to challenge and surpass the best of the School of Paris. That means the best of Picasso, Braque, Mondrian, staggering. These were giants of modern art. And my teachers had the temerity to want to be better than that. So I love the ambition, love the look of the thick, juicy paint, the abstractness of it all, and I was simply, by temperament, unable to shut out the real world that I could see and touch. Original definition of mixed feelings, I guess. So I tried to embrace what I could, and I also tried to stumble on to my own nature and reintroduce the tangible world.
But the work that you're currently doing now is very different, but very much like the sculpture that you've created in the past. And I actually would like to ask you 2 questions about your painting. The first part is, right now you are only working in black and white, so why have you chosen such a restricted palette? And the other is, it seems that one of the most important aspects in your painting is the rich texture. Is that influenced by your sculpture?
My biggest reaction against my teachers, I still love and embrace the thick paint, the textured surface, the sensuality, delight in art material. But I decided to use the actual space right around my body. So for years I've been doing sculptures of people as big as myself, friends, or people whom I know psychologically, and I hope they know I'm not going to kill them, because I put plaster all over their bodies. But these are people in environments. They're in places or parts of places. So for years I've been making sculpture into which I could walk and see from many points of view. I've been dealing, I'm well known for making life-size white plaster figures.
Absolutely.
But early on, I began painting on the sculptures. So for 30 years, I have been painting on my environmental pieces. But it's also part of the high ambition. It's, I think, a bear hug, an embrace of different ways of seeing things, hoping to come to some fusion or some common denominator. So on that hunt, there are times where I've had to put color aside. The problems become so complicated in fusion, in pulling all different, in mixing media.
Yes.
I'm trying to mix sculpture plus painting, and traditionally there are stone wall boundaries between these various media.
Absolutely.
All right. So if I temporarily put aside the seductiveness of color, I want to deal with pure structure and black, white, and gray. That if I do that, that means I have to become extremely conscious of quality of light. Since I'm chasing down a complicated set of problems.
Absolutely.
So if I'm dealing with quality of light, Renaissance painting, Rembrandt, Courbet, Velázquez, the whole history of art is riddled with old master painters who have been dealing sensitively with quality of light, coupled to observing how people look in real life, making mimesis, imitation of the way people look, plus psychological probe, especially Rembrandt.
Absolutely, chiaroscuro.
Yeah, and chiaroscuro, and then then I'm returned to Renaissance, Leonardo especially. Absolutely. Leonardo's charcoal drawings. The Italians have a name for it called sfumato, and translated into English, that means it's a very delicate thing. At the dawn of light, the first visible perception of a three-dimensional form. It's about as clearly as I can say it without losing the poetry. Okay, so that provoked me into making sculptures, environmental sculptures, figure plus environment, that I had painted all black. If I put one light perfectly, I'm in this modernist mode. I'm using real light to make shades of gray. It makes me traditional avant-garde, I guess.
Absolutely, that's great.
But if you do it in drawing, you're harking back to chiaroscuro and sfumato. You're dealing with Michelangelo's delicacy of rendering of muscles and nuance, change of texture. Black and white drawings, wash. You're back to Leonardo. So that I started slipping back and forth between memory of admired Rembrandt etchings, admired Michelangelo and Leonardo drawings, and I'm supposed to be so outrageously avant-garde at the same time. And all it is this modernist insistence that it's possible to deal with your own sensations, and then remembering with homage or admiration or staggering marveling at extraordinary statements that were made 50 years ago, 100 years, 500 years ago. There is a reason for preserving art. It's to excite artists to work today.
Absolutely. That actually kind of leads me, if if that's a good point. That actually leads me into the next question that I'd like to ask you. Did you always know that you were an artist? Was that something that was revealed to you at some point? Was there a point that you identified that you were an artist, or was it something that was always very strong within you?
My mother was always busy helping my father in his butcher shop, but I think probably in a clutch of guilt, she bought me the Book of Knowledge, the equivalent of the Encyclopedia Britannica, I guess, when I was a kid. I fell in love. Art looked magical to me. They had the history of art from Greece, from Renaissance.
At the beginnings,
it was like
and
it was like a Victorian set of volumes. I thought art was marvelous, and when I was a kid, I think I was very late with my motor development. I scrawled. I think I was a natural-born expressionist. My teachers were horrified.
No wonder your passion for it.
Yeah, they were horrified, and they advised me to go to a scientific high school to discipline myself. So they sent me to Stuyvesant, and I was supposed to become a research scientist, and I took all the art courses I could. I loved it. I never got much encouragement from my teachers. I think I was self-driven because I thought it was a magical occupation.
So it was something that was always within you.
Yeah. My father was discouraging. He said, you don't make a living out of something like that. And he advised me to produce food because people always have to eat.
That's right, a very practical occupation. Absolutely. One of the things that I think is a real landmark for you in your career as an artist is in 1962, you were in a nationally recognized exhibition held at the Sidney Janis Gallery titled The Realists. The very impressive roster of artists included you, Roy Lichtenstein, Klaus Oldenburg, Andy Warhol, Jim Dine, Tom Wesselman, James Rosenquist, and Robert Indiana. The name pop art was given to this new work and remained the name of the movement. How did this recognition affect you and your work? Do you still see yourself as a pop artist? And would you identify some of your works that are examples of this idea?
Someone like Warhol and Lichtenstein became very famous as pop artists. They became quintessential pop.
Absolutely.
Because they used the language of comic strips in American advertising and photography, like the very sophisticated new language of mass media that has swept the world. I've been dealing, everybody deals differently. I'd be hard-pressed to name any pop artist beyond Lichtenstein and Warhol. But, the glue that holds my whole generation together, I think, is this concern with the look of daily life in an industrial society. Probably, I suspect, more basic glue than simply two-dimensional advertising.
George, during this period, some extraordinary events were occurring at your farm here in South Brunswick. You called these events happenings. Would you share some of your memories of these happenings and how they influenced you as an artist?
My good friend Alan Capro is called the father of happenings. He was teaching art history at Rutgers. We had become very friendly, and we were, both of us, all excited about the new possibilities in art movements. The late 50s, early 60s was an explosion of vitality in American art. We were the generation that immediately followed abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism had influenced art all over the world. It was the American culture victory, along with the victory of American rock and roll, fashion, Hollywood movies. The United States had ended World War II as the richest country in the world with the most vibrant physical wealth and mental life. Just like as flat as that. The devastation of the war in Europe had killed millions of people. the war in Asia, was equally as brutal and prolonged. The United States was the only place that had a jauntiness, a pride, a self-esteem that allowed the flowering of incredible list of ideas. Besides pop art, and pop art dealt with an optimistic embrace of modern industrial society, coupled with serious internal abstraction. Abstraction is not unknown in Europe, but I think Europe had been devastated physically and mentally. The war had a very heavy cost. Okay, some of the movements, happenings, were associated with pop art. They were painters' theater, live people, invented costumes, stories that had no beginning, middle, or end. They were all about images. My friends were doing them. Rutgers faculty was involved in happenings. The Rutgers faculty was also involved with a movement called Fluxus, which was as close to anarchy as you can get.
Wow.
And it was close to Dada and Surrealism because it was connected with the European Dada movement with ridicule and mockery of established authority. The Dada movement mocked the extreme nationalism that killed millions of the best young men, at the end of World War I.
Yes.
Fluxus had a lot of that attitude and a mockery of established art and art movements. Then there was minimal sculpture that dealt with stark, singular images with no relation to environment or place. There was conceptual. People started writing art that were a string of words. Nobody's paid proper attention, I think, to the fervent invention and vitality of the early 60s. You take your choice, like you can love, you can hate any of the movements or all of them, you can hate the pluralism, you can embrace it, but it was incredibly good, I think, in retrospect. Okay, and it was a rich tumble of ideas that slid from one area to another. Boundaries were disregarded in all these fields, so that each of us outdid each other trying to destroy boundaries and embrace as much as possible into their work, which explains an awful lot of my attitudes, at least.
Can you give us examples in some of the pieces that you did during that period, or even present day, that have resulted?
Strangely enough, for 30 years I've been making environmental sculpture, sometimes with white figures, sometimes with painted figures, sometimes with flat paint, sometimes with expressionist paint. I've tried a whole range of things. The couple behind us is one of those gray painted figures. I have the costume party next door,
Very colorful.
which I spent years changing the colors on. I've done a whole long series of painted sculpture in the other rooms that led me to the pure painting that I ended up with.
Yes.
In a big circle. After trying to draw everything in, I ended up in paintings enlarging still life objects. I made a coffee cup that was at least 6 times bigger than a real cup. It seemed to be quicker and easier for me to handle that problem in paint than make a plaster sculpture of a giant cup, which I may which I may still do. It's true. Point is, in what seems to be a pure painting, there's this enlarged still life object, all the texture that I still love and admire from abstract expressionist painting, but I did avoid, again, the seduction of color. I'm trying to deal with black and white, Oh, black and white as what? I don't know. It has to do with a sense of architecture, a sense of order, a sense of austerity. And you know, what is the essential structure of all these ordinary things that surround us as trivia, you know, that we take for granted? And I think they're more than that, obviously. And I can get lost in the rhythms of spaces between objects, you know, so that I don't know. It simply occurred to me that going back to ordinary painting was an extraordinary activity.
You use the word ordinary, and I love that, because I see that in your work, in your sculpture and your painting, you deal with objects and images that are very much a part of ourselves in our daily life. They're almost commonplace, and I had mentioned this before, that even when you deal with an exalted theme or a biblical theme, there's something very identifiable about the work that we relate to, and I see that happening in your painting also. Is this something that you're continually or consciously aware of as you're making the work, or is it something that just expresses itself?
Oh, absolutely. I have an intuition that everything we consider ordinary is quite miraculous.
Absolutely.
You know, just getting up in the morning and going about your own business and having your breakfast and drinking your coffee, all the motions that we do fluidly with no thought are amazing, amazingly complex. Okay. If that's true, you know, the logic is very simply extended. Most people today are not educated into Greek myth. You know, very few people study Greek and Latin anymore, and those stories have astonishingly little to do. You know, we applaud America, and you know, we do lose a certain continuity of culture in this country. And, you know, American pop culture is not rich enough for a lot of people. So I was brought up Jewish, sent to Hebrew school, and learning all the Old Testament stories, which are my equivalent of Greek myth. They have a distant relationship. I'm nowhere near Orthodox observant, you know, but I love to consider the contradictions and fascination, and, you know, and dramatic qualities of these stories.
Yes.
You know, my father took me to synagogue when I was a kid on the high holidays, and I read these descriptions of sacrifices and the burning of goat entrails. And since I used to be a chicken farmer, I know what dead animals smell like. I was astounded at the claps of thunder, columns of smoke, stench, putting sins in a surrogate fashion onto animals and driving them into the woods, you know, all these things. And then reading about the sacrifice of Isaac, for instance. And I said, you know, when I was a kid, I said, what kind of father is that? You know, here the kid is born when he's 100 years old, and he's been barren, and he's been promised by this strange, invisible God that his children would be numberless on earth, and this same character is asking him to cut his son's throat, and he's 100 years old. You know, so the contradictions of personality, of events, and I said, you know, he reminded, you know, Abraham reminded me of Tevye, the milkman, because, you know, Tevye picked up his chin and he talked to God. Yes. You know, so there's an ordinariness. You know, there's an ordinariness about
so the fiddler on the roof.
Fiddler on the roof. Okay, if we ordinary folks can wonder about these extraordinary things, and you put it on a daily basis, you know, it's possible to daydream in these forbidden areas, and you come up with incredible contradictions.
Well, you certainly have.
You know, what's the truth? What's the truth? You know, and everybody, and there must be hundreds and hundreds of people announcing that they have the single absolute truth. And, that's what astonishes me. So if I consider myself a rather ordinary fellow wondering about these strange contradictory things. How can I talk about it?
Right.
Which is what makes the art so interesting to me.
And what makes your art so interesting, like the piece Ishmael also, which we had talked about before, which embodies, the being the father of two religions, and going back to the story of Abraham again, that you're taking an extraordinary theme and bringing it into a more ordinary way of looking at it, so that someone like myself, I see it in 3 dimensions, rather than thinking about it on a pure philosophical plane.
Yeah, there's a Yiddish expression called chutzpah, and it's having the nerve to put yourself into an extraordinary position that you don't belong in, or it's out of your league or something like that. But that's if you want to become a modernist artist, you have to have the same kind of disregard for authority and have the nerve or the courage to think for yourself. Wherever the thought leads you, wherever the logic leads. A lot of people are terrified at that, and simply want the reassurance of an authority telling them what to do. So if you set a high ambition for your work and you have the nerve to do your own thinking, it's a frightening occupation.
George, I want to wish you continued success, health, and happiness to you and your family. And most importantly, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your thoughts.